The honey dripped golden and thick from Nora McCarthy's fingertips as she stood among her 40 hives in the Arkansas Valley, speaking to her bees in a voice so tender it could have hushed a storm. It was 1882, and Bentonville sat nestled in the northwestern corner of Arkansas, where the rolling hills met vast stretches of wildflower meadows that made her bees dance with joy. Nora had inherited the land from her father 3 years ago when she was 20 years old, and though many thought a woman had no business running a honey operation alone, she had proven them wrong season after season. Her honey was the finest in 3 counties, sought after by merchants as far as Little Rock, and the secret was simple. She loved her bees and they loved her back. "They're now sweet girls," she murmured, her face inches from the entrance of the largest hive. "I know the clover's been sparse this week, but tomorrow I will take you to the eastern field where the wildflowers are blooming purple and yellow, thick as a carpet. You will feast like queens." The bees hummed in response, their collective voice a symphony only she seemed to truly hear. Nora closed her eyes and listened, her long dark braid falling over her shoulder, her simple cotton dress stained with wax and pollen. She had learned this way of beekeeping from her father, who had learned it from his mother, who had brought the knowledge from the old country. Talk to them, respect them, love them, and they will give you everything. She did not know anyone was listening until she heard the sharp intake of breath behind her. Nora spun around, her heart hammering, and found herself face to face with a cowboy. He stood about 10 feet away, his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly damp with sweat. He was tall and lean, with the sun-weathered skin of a man who spent his days in the saddle, and his eyes were the color of creek water in summer, green and brown all at once. He looked to be about her age, perhaps a year or 2 older, and the expression on his face was one of absolute wonder. "I apologize, miss," he said quickly, his voice rough but sincere. "I did not mean to startle you. I was riding past and my horse needed water, and I heard you speaking and I just—" He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "I have never heard anything like that in my life." Nora's initial fear ebbed, though her pulse still raced. "You were eavesdropping on me." "Not intentionally," he said, taking a step forward and then stopping himself, as if remembering propriety. "I swear to you I meant no disrespect, but the way you were talking to those bees with such tenderness, such care—" He shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. "It was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard." Heat rose to Nora's cheeks. She was not accustomed to compliments, especially not from strange cowboys who appeared out of nowhere. "They are just bees." "No," he said firmly, "they are not just anything. And the way you speak to them, like they are your family, your friends—" He trailed off again, and she noticed the way his hands turned his hat brim over and over, a nervous gesture. "My name is Nathan Pierce. I have been working at the Thompson Ranch about 5 miles west of here for the past month. I am no one important, but I would very much like to know your name." She studied him for a long moment. There was something earnest in his face, something honest that made her want to trust him despite her usual caution. "Nora McCarthy. This is my land, my hives." "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss McCarthy." Nathan took another step closer, and this time she did not retreat. "Would you, that is? I know I have no right to ask, but would you mind if I watered my horse at your creek and perhaps rested for a moment? The ride has been long." Nora glanced at the sun, which was beginning its descent toward the western hills. She should send him away. A proper woman did not entertain strange men on her property, but there was something about Nathan Pierce that made her want to break her own rules. "The creek is just beyond that stand of oaks," she said, gesturing. "You may water your horse there, and there is a pump by the barn if you need fresh water yourself." "Thank you." His smile was genuine, transforming his whole face. "You are very kind." As he turned to collect his horse, which was grazing nearby, Nora found herself watching him. He moved with an easy grace, speaking softly to the animal as he led it toward the creek. She could not help but notice the way he stroked the horse's neck, the same tenderness in his touch that she used with her bees. She forced herself to turn back to her work, checking each hive methodically, making notes in her small leather journal about which colonies were thriving and which needed attention. But her concentration was broken. She kept glancing toward the creek, where Nathan had settled on a large rock, his horse drinking deeply from the cool water. After what seemed an appropriate amount of time, Nora walked down to the creek herself, carrying a jar of honey and a cloth. She told herself it was simply politeness, nothing more. "Mr. Pierce," she called as she approached. He stood immediately respectful. "Please call me Nathan." "Nathan, then." She held out the jar. "For your journey, my honey, it is good for energy on long rides." He took the jar carefully, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through her arm. "I could not possibly accept this without offering payment." "Consider it payment for the entertainment of watching you fumble with your hat," she said, surprising herself with the teasing tone. Nathan laughed, a rich sound that made something in her chest flutter. "I suppose I deserve that. I must have looked like a fool standing there gawking at you." "You looked like a man who had never seen a beekeeper before." "I have seen beekeepers," he said, "but I have never seen anyone speak to their bees with such love. My mother used to talk to her garden that way before she passed. She would tell each plant what she expected of it and praise it when it bloomed. I had forgotten that sound until I heard you today." The smile faded from Nora's face, replaced by something softer. "When did you lose her?" 10 years ago. I was 13. Nathan looked out over the creek. "It has been just my father and me since then, moving from ranch to ranch, following the work. He is getting older now. His joints ache something fierce. I am trying to save enough to buy us a small piece of land, something permanent." "That is a good dream," Nora said quietly. She sat down on the rock he had vacated, and after a moment he sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. They talked as the sun painted the sky pink and orange. Nathan told her about growing up on the trail, learning to break horses and mend fences and read the weather in the clouds. Nora told him about inheriting the land, about the first winter alone when she nearly lost everything, about the way her bees had brought her back from the edge of despair. "I do not know what I would do without them," she admitted. "Some people think it is strange the way I talk to them, but they listen. They respond. There is an intelligence there, a communication that most people never take the time to understand." "It is not strange," Nathan said. "It is rare, and it is wonderful." The way he looked at her when he said it made her breath catch. There was admiration in his eyes and something else, something that felt like the beginning of possibility. "I should go," Nathan said reluctantly as the first stars appeared. "My father will wonder where I have gone." "But Miss McCarthy, Nora, would it be terribly forward of me to ask if I could visit again? Not to impose, but perhaps to hear you speak to your bees once more, and to speak with you if you would allow it." Nora knew she should say no. She knew the proper thing was to send him away and forget this strange, unexpected encounter. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Yes, you may visit again." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was like sunrise. "Tomorrow, I could come tomorrow afternoon when my work is done." "Tomorrow afternoon," she agreed. She watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, and then stood alone by the creek for a long time, listening to the night sounds and trying to understand what had just happened to her carefully ordered life. The next afternoon, Nora found herself checking her appearance in the small mirror by her door 3 times before she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She wore her second-best dress, the blue one with the white collar that her friend Margaret had always said brought out her eyes. Her hair was freshly braided and pinned up, though tendrils still escaped around her face in the humidity. Nathan arrived exactly when he said he would, and this time he brought something with him. A small wooden frame, beautifully carved with intricate patterns of leaves and flowers. "I made this last night," he said, almost shyly. "I thought perhaps you could use it for something, though I confess I am not entirely sure what beekeepers need. But you mentioned keeping notes in a journal, and I thought maybe you could use it to display a page of importance, or perhaps a drawing, or I am rambling, aren't I?" Nora took the frame, running her fingers over the smooth wood and delicate carving. "This is beautiful. You made this in one night." "I do not sleep much," he admitted, "and I like working with wood. It helps me think." "Thank you." She held the frame against her chest. "Truly, this is the kindest gift anyone has given me in a long time." They walked through her property together, Nora showing him each hive and explaining the personality of each colony. Some were aggressive and protective, others gentle and calm. Some produced darker honey, others lighter. Nathan listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly trying to understand. When they reached her favorite hive, the one she called Prosperity, Nora knelt down and began to speak. "Hello, my darlings. How was your day? Did you find the purple clover I told you about? I know the journey was far, but it is worth it. Is it not? The richness of that nectar, the way it makes your honey taste like summer dreams." The bees responded with their humming song, and Nora hummed back softly, a wordless melody that seemed to calm them even further. She reached out carefully and let several bees walk across her fingers. "They trust you completely," Nathan breathed. He was kneeling beside her now, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Trust must be earned every single day," Nora said. "One wrong move, one moment of carelessness or anger, and it is broken. But when you have it, when they know you will never harm them, they give you everything." "I would like to earn your trust that way," Nathan said quietly, "if you would let me try." Nora turned to look at him and found his face mere inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw, the absolute sincerity in his expression. "You barely know me," she whispered. "Then let me know you. Let me come here every day and learn who you are, what you love, what you dream about. Let me hear you speak to your bees and tell me about your day and sit by the creek while the sun goes down." His hand moved as if to touch her face, then stopped. "I have never felt this way before. I heard your voice yesterday and something in my soul recognized it, like coming home after a long journey." "That is a pretty speech," Nora said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her heart raced. "It is the truth." Nathan's voice was rough with emotion. "I am not a man of pretty speeches. I am just a cowboy with nothing to my name but a good horse and strong hands. But I know what I felt when I heard you yesterday, and I know what I feel now, sitting here with you. If you tell me to leave and never come back, I will do it. But if you give me a chance, just a chance, I swear I will spend every day trying to be worthy of it." Nora looked back at her bees, watching them move in their intricate dance across the comb. Her father had always told her to trust her instincts, to listen to the quiet voice inside that knew truth from lies. And that voice was telling her that Nathan Pierce was genuine, that the emotion in his eyes was real, that whatever was happening between them was worth exploring. "You may come back," she said softly. "Every day if you wish, but I must warn you, Nathan, I am not an easy woman. I am particular about my routines, protective of my independence, and entirely too devoted to my bees. I have sent away every suitor who has come calling in the past 3 years because none of them understood this life I have built. If you are looking for a delicate flower who will swoon and simper, you should look elsewhere. Nathan's smile was slow and warm. Good. I have no interest in delicate flowers. I am interested in strong, passionate women who talk to bees and run their own businesses and are not afraid to speak their minds. In other words, I am interested in you, Nora McCarthy, exactly as you are. Something loosened in Nora's chest, a knot she had not even realized was there. Then I suppose you had better stay for supper. I have stew on the stove and fresh bread, and it seems a shame to waste it on just myself. They ate at her small kitchen table as the evening light filtered through the windows, turning everything golden. Nathan told her about his father, a man named Samuel who had once been a farmer but lost his land in a bad flood. He told her about learning to ride when he was barely tall enough to reach the stirrups, about sleeping under the stars and waking to frost on his bedroll, about the satisfaction of a hard day's work and the loneliness of never having a place to truly call home. Nora told him about her mother, who had died when she was 12, about learning to keep bees from her father while standing on a stool to reach the hives, about the first time she was stung and thought she would have to give up her dream. She told him about the winter after her father died, when the snow came early and heavy and she had to wrap the hives in blankets and pray they would survive. I sat in this kitchen and cried, she admitted. I was certain I would lose everything. But when spring came and I opened those hives, they were alive. Every single colony had made it through. It felt like a miracle, like they had survived out of sheer stubbornness and love. Like their keeper, Nathan said gently. They talked until the candles burned low, and when Nathan finally rose to leave, Nora walked him out to where his horse was tethered. The night was warm and alive with cricket song, the air heavy with the scent of honeysuckle. Tomorrow? Nathan asked, swinging up into the saddle. Tomorrow, Nora confirmed. She watched him ride away again, and this time when she walked back to her house, she was smiling. True to his word, Nathan came every day. Sometimes he arrived in the early afternoon and stayed until dark. Other times he came at sunset with wildflowers he had picked during his lunch break, their stems wrapped in cloth to keep them fresh. He helped her move hives to new locations when the flowers changed with the season. He learned to identify the different sounds the bees made and what each meant. He built her a new work table for her honey extraction, with compartments for her tools and a smooth surface that made her work easier. As the weeks passed, Nora found herself looking forward to his arrival with an intensity that sometimes frightened her. She would catch herself checking the road, listening for hoofbeats, and have to force her attention back to her work. But it was impossible to deny what was growing between them. One evening, about 6 weeks after they met, Nathan arrived with news. The foreman at Thompson's ranch offered me a permanent position, he said. Good wages, steady work. I spoke to Mr. Thompson himself, and he said that if I prove myself this season, he might consider selling me that parcel of land at the southern edge of his property. It is small, only 20 acres, but it has good water and decent soil. I could build a house there, start a small horse breeding operation. I could finally give my father the home he deserves. Nathan, that is wonderful, Nora exclaimed. You must be so pleased. I am, he said. But I told Mr. Thompson I needed to speak with someone before I accepted. Who? You. Nathan took her hands in his. Nora, these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. I love hearing you talk to your bees. I love the way you bite your lower lip when you are concentrating on your journal entries. I love your stubbornness and your passion, and the way you never let anyone tell you what you cannot do. I love you, Nora. I love you with everything I am." Nora's breath caught in her throat. She had known this was coming, had felt it building between them like a summer storm, but hearing the words still sent her heart racing. "I know it is soon," Nathan continued urgently. "I know we have only known each other for a short time, but when something is right, you know it. My mother used to say that. She told me that when I found the woman I was meant to be with, I would know it in my bones. And Nora, I know it. I know it every time I see you, every time I hear your voice. So I am asking you, before I accept Mr. Thompson's offer and plan my future, would you consider being part of that future? Would you consider being my wife?" Nora closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten. Everything was happening so fast, and yet it did not feel fast at all. It felt inevitable, like watching a flower bloom or honey drip from the comb, a natural progression that could not be stopped. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" Nathan's voice was gentle. "Of losing this place, this life I have built. Every man who has courted me before wanted me to give up my bees, to become a proper wife who stays in the house and tends only to domestic matters. I cannot do that, Nathan. I will not do that. I would never ask you to." Nathan lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Nora, I fell in love with you because of your bees, because of the life you have built. Why would I want you to give that up? If you marry me, we will figure out how to balance it all. Your honey operation, my work at the ranch, the life we build together. I am not interested in changing you. I am interested in loving you exactly as you are and building a future where we both get to do what we love." Nora opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the truth written in every line of his face, heard it in the tremor of his voice. This man, this cowboy who had stumbled into her life just weeks ago, understood her in a way no one else ever had. "Yes," she said, the word coming out as barely more than a breath. "Yes," Nathan's eyes widened. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will be part of your future. Yes to all of it." Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it was like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day making sure you never regret this," he promised. "You had better," she said, but she was smiling. "Because if you make me regret it, my bees will hunt you down." He laughed, and the sound was pure joy. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Bentonville's small church. Nathan's father Samuel attended, a thin man with kind eyes who shook Nora's hand and told her he was grateful his son had found someone who made him so happy. Margaret, Nora's closest friend in town, stood as her witness and cried through the entire ceremony. The minister, Reverend Thomas, smiled benevolently as Nathan and Nora exchanged vows they had written themselves. "I promise to always listen when you speak to your bees," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to support your dreams and never ask you to be less than who you are. I promise to love you in sunshine and storm, in abundance and scarcity, for all the days of my life. I promise to make space in my life for your dreams as well as my own," Nora said. "I promise to trust you with my heart, even though it frightens me. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us, and to love you with the same devotion I give my bees, which is to say completely and without reservation." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her so thoroughly that several people in the small congregation chuckled. They spent their wedding night in Nora's house, which was now their house. Nathan had moved his few belongings in the day before, and Samuel had taken a room at the boarding house in town, insisting the newlyweds needed privacy. Nora had been nervous about this part, the physical intimacy that marriage entailed. But Nathan was patient and gentle, taking his time to learn what she liked, communicating with her throughout. When they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, an extension of the connection they had already built. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in her small bed, Nathan traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Tell me what you are thinking." "I am thinking that I cannot believe this is my life now," Nora said honestly. 2 months ago I was alone. Now I am married to a man I love beyond reason. It feels like a dream. If it is a dream, I never want to wake up. Nathan kissed her temple, "Though we should probably get a bigger bed." Nora laughed, swatting his chest lightly. "We should probably do a lot of things, figure out how to combine our lives, our work, our futures." "We will figure it out together," Nathan assured her. "That is what marriage is it not? Figuring out life together." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreams. Nathan would continue working at Thompson's ranch while saving for the land purchase. Nora would continue her honey operation, but Nathan would help her expand, perhaps adding another 20 hives by next spring. They talked about eventually breeding horses on their own property, about building a house big enough for Samuel to have his own room, about the children they hoped to have someday. "I want them to grow up like I did," Nora said, "learning to respect the land and the creatures on it. Learning that success comes from care and dedication, not from taking shortcuts. And I want them to know stability," Nathan added, "to have a home they can count on, roots that go deep, to never have to wonder where they will sleep next month or whether there will be food on the table." "We will give them all of that," Nora promised. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Nathan's work at the ranch was demanding, often requiring him to leave before dawn and return after dark. There were days when Nora barely saw him, and the loneliness would creep back in, making her doubt. But Nathan always seemed to know when she was struggling. He would leave her notes hidden among her beekeeping supplies, little messages of love and encouragement that she would find throughout the day. He would wake her in the early morning darkness with kisses and whispered promises before he left for work. And on his rare days off, he devoted himself entirely to her and the life they were building. Samuel became a fixture at their home, arriving most afternoons to help with whatever needed doing. Despite his aching joints, he proved surprisingly good with the bees, moving slowly and calmly in a way that never startled them. He told Nora stories about Nathan as a boy, about his kindness even then, his way of caring for injured animals and standing up for smaller children. "He has always had a good heart," Samuel said one afternoon as they worked together to repair a hive that had been damaged by a fallen branch. "But I have never seen him as happy as he is with you. You have given him something I could never provide, no matter how hard I tried. You have given him a home." "He has given me the same," Nora said softly. "I did not realize how lonely I was until he arrived. I thought I was complete, but I was just surviving. Now I am living." The first major test of their marriage came in late autumn, when a rival honey producer named Jeremiah Finch approached Nora at the town market. Finch was a bitter man in his 50s who had been trying to drive Nora out of business for years. He had spread rumors about her honey being impure, tried to undercut her prices, and even attempted to buy her land when her father first died. "I hear you have taken a husband," Finch said, his tone snide. "I suppose that means you will finally quit this foolish business and let a man do the work properly." "My marriage changes nothing about my business," Nora replied coolly, "and I would appreciate it if you did not spread false assumptions about my intentions. No assumptions needed. Everyone knows a married woman cannot properly tend to such matters. Your husband will want your attention on home and family, not on playing with bees." Finch leaned closer, his breath sour. "I will make you a final offer for your operation. Fair price, paid immediately. Otherwise, I will make things very difficult for you this season." "Is there a problem here?" Nathan's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. He had been loading supplies into their wagon but had clearly noticed the confrontation. Finch straightened, eyeing Nathan warily. "Just having a business discussion with your wife." "My wife's business is her own," Nathan said evenly. "And she has already told you her answer. I suggest you accept it and move along." "You will regret not taking my offer," Finch said to Nora, ignoring Nathan entirely. "Mark my words." As Finch walked away, Nathan put his arm around Nora's shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. He has been trying to intimidate me for years." But Nora could not quite keep the tremor from her voice. "What do you need from me?" Nathan asked. It was a question he asked often, and Nora loved him for it. He never assumed, never tried to take over. He simply offered his support and let her decide how to use it. "Just be here," she said. "Remind me that I am not alone in this anymore." "You will never be alone again," Nathan promised. "Whatever he tries, we will face it together." Finch's threat materialized 2 weeks later when Nora discovered that several of her hives had been vandalized in the night. The frames had been pulled out and thrown on the ground, the colonies disrupted and scattered. It was not enough to kill the bees, but it would set back production significantly and cause immense stress to the colonies. Nora stood in the midst of the destruction and felt rage build in her chest. These were not just bees to her. They were her companions, her livelihood, her passion. And someone had violated them out of spite and greed. Nathan found her there an hour later, tears streaming down her face as she tried to salvage what she could. He did not say anything at first, just rolled up his sleeves and started helping. Together they worked through the morning, carefully reassembling hives, coaxing bees back into their homes, checking for damage to the queens. When they finally finished, both exhausted and covered in bee stings, Nathan spoke. "I am riding into town to speak with the sheriff. This was deliberate destruction of property, and it needs to be addressed." "The sheriff will not do anything," Nora said bitterly. "He and Finch are friends. He will say there is no proof, that it could have been animals or weather or any number of things. Then I will speak to Mr. Thompson. He has influence in this town, and he values honesty and hard work. If Finch is willing to do this to you, he is capable of doing it to others." Nathan took her face in his hands. "I will not stand by and watch someone hurt you, Nora. I will not let him destroy what you have built." Nathan was true to his word. He rode to Thompson's ranch that afternoon and explained the situation. Mr. Thompson, a gruff but fair man in his 60s, was outraged. He not only went to the sheriff himself, but also spread word throughout the ranching community about Finch's actions. Within a week, several businesses had stopped buying Finch's honey, and he found himself ostracized at the local feed store. The vandalism stopped, but the tension remained. Nora found herself constantly vigilant, checking the hives multiple times a day, jumping at unexpected sounds. Nathan began sleeping lighter, keeping his rifle close to the door. "I hate this," Nora said one night as they lay in bed. "I hate that he has made me afraid in my own home." "Then we do not let the fear win," Nathan said. "We keep living our lives, keep building our dreams." "The best revenge is success, is it not?" Nora rolled over to face him. "When did you become so wise?" "I have always been wise. You just married me for my good looks." He was teasing, trying to lighten her mood, and it worked. Nora found herself smiling despite everything. "I married you because you heard me speaking to my bees, and instead of thinking I was crazy, you thought it was beautiful." Nathan's expression softened. "It was beautiful. It still is. Every time I hear you talking to them, telling them about your day or singing to calm them, I fall in love with you all over again." They made love then, slow and tender, reaffirming their connection and commitment. Afterward, Nora felt some of the tension leave her body. As long as she had Nathan beside her, she could face anything. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers, and Nora's bees thrived. Despite the setback from the vandalism, her colonies rebounded beautifully, producing honey so rich and flavorful that she sold out of her entire stock within 3 weeks. Nathan helped her process the harvest, learning the careful work of extracting honey from the combs, filtering it, and filling the jars. "This is far more complicated than I realized," he said, watching her work with new appreciation. "I thought you just took honey from the hive and put it in jars." "Most people do," Nora said, not looking up from her careful filtering process. "But quality requires attention to detail. The temperature of the honey, the way you strain it, even the jars you use all affect the final product. My father taught me that excellence is worth the extra effort." "Your father was a wise man," Nathan said. "I wish I could have met him." "He would have liked you," Nora said softly. "He always said I should marry someone who was not afraid of hard work and who treated me as an equal. That is you." In late spring, Mr. Thompson called Nathan to his office and made him an offer. "I have been watching you this past year, Pierce. You are a good worker, reliable and honest, and my foreman tells me the horses respond well to you. I am willing to sell you that 20 acres I mentioned, and I will give you favorable terms on the payment. 5 years at low interest. What do you say?" Nathan could barely contain his excitement as he rode home to tell Nora. They celebrated that night with a special dinner and a bottle of wine that had been a wedding gift from Margaret. "We are going to have our own land," Nathan kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Real land with a deed and everything. I can build us a proper house, with a big kitchen for you and a separate room for honey processing, and a barn for the horses and a garden for vegetables. We can make it whatever we want." "It will be wonderful," Nora agreed, caught up in his enthusiasm. "And my hives will be right there, close enough that I can check on them throughout the day. We can plant flowers specifically for the bees, create a paradise for them." They spent hours that night sketching plans, arguing good-naturedly about where each building should go, how large the house should be, whether they needed a porch that wrapped all the way around or just on 2 sides. Samuel joined them the next day and added his own ideas, pointing out practical considerations they had missed. "You will want the barn positioned so the prevailing winds do not blow the smell toward the house," he said. "And the well should be uphill from the outhouse, not downhill. These things matter." "Did you ever own land, Samuel?" Nora asked. The old man's face grew distant. "Once long ago, before the flood took it. I had about 30 acres in Missouri, good farmland. I was going to build an empire," he smiled sadly. "But life had other plans." "I am glad Nathan will have what I lost. It means everything I went through was not for nothing." "You will live there with us," Nathan said firmly. "The house will have room for you. You are family." "I would like that," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would like that very much." Construction on their new property began in early summer. Nathan worked every spare moment, often well into the night by lantern light. Mr. Thompson, impressed by Nathan's dedication, gave him occasional days off to focus on the building, and even sent some of the ranch hands over to help with the heavier work. The house took shape slowly, a solid structure of wood and stone that would withstand Arkansas weather for decades. Nora continued her honey operation from her original property, but she spent her afternoons at the new land, bringing Nathan lunch and staying to help however she could. She learned to hammer nails straight, to mix mortar, to measure and cut boards. Her hands, Already work roughened from beekeeping, developed new calluses. "You do not have to do this," Nathan told her one particularly hot afternoon when she was struggling with a stubborn board. "I can handle the construction." "We are building our home," Nora said stubbornly. "I want to be part of every bit of it. I want to know that my sweat and effort went into these walls, that this is truly ours." Nathan kissed her then, despite the workers watching with amused grins. "Have I mentioned today that I love you?" "Not in the past hour," Nora teased. I was beginning to wonder. By autumn, the house was finished. It was not grand, but it was solid and beautiful, with large windows that let in plenty of light, a spacious kitchen with a modern stove, and 3 good-sized bedrooms. The barn was completed a month later, and Nathan immediately began the process of acquiring horses to breed. Moving day was chaotic and exhausting. They transported Nora's hives carefully, working in the early morning when the bees were calm. Samuel helped organize the household goods, directing the placement of furniture with the authority of someone who actually understood domestic arrangement. By evening, they were moved in, surrounded by boxes and exhausted but happy. "This is ours," Nathan said, standing in the middle of their new kitchen. "Our home, our land, our future." Nora wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Our everything." That night, they christened their new bedroom thoroughly, and afterward lay tangled together in sheets that smelled of fresh cotton and new beginnings. "I want to have a baby," Nora said suddenly into the darkness. Nathan's hand, which had been lazily stroking her arm, stilled. "You do?" "I think so. I am 23 now. We have been married almost a year and a half. We have a home, stable income, a future. It seems like the right time." She paused. "If you are ready, if you want that too." "If I want that," Nathan rolled to face her, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. "Nora, I would love nothing more than to have a child with you. Children, plural, if we are blessed with them. I just did not want to pressure you. I know your bees take enormous time and energy." "I can manage both," Nora said confidently. "Women have been doing it for centuries. And I will have you to help me. We will figure it out just like we have figured out everything else." "Then yes," Nathan said, kissing her softly. "Let us start trying for a baby. Let us add to this beautiful life we are building." They made love again, with new intentionality, new hope. And as Nora drifted off to sleep afterward, she felt a deep sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place exactly as they should. She did not conceive immediately. Fall passed into winter, winter into spring, and still her monthly courses came faithfully. Nora tried not to be discouraged, but with each passing month, the disappointment grew heavier. She saw the concern in Nathan's eyes, though he tried to hide it behind optimism and reassurance. "It will happen when it happens," he would say, holding her while she cried. "There is no timeline on these things." "What if something is wrong with me?" Nora whispered one night. "What if I cannot have children? Then we will have a different future than we imagined, but it will still be a good one," Nathan said firmly. "I did not marry you to be a baby-making machine. I married you because I love you and want to spend my life with you. Children would be wonderful, but they are not the only source of happiness and meaning." His words helped, but the longing remained. Nora found herself envious of the pregnant women she saw in town, of Margaret, who had just delivered a healthy baby boy. She threw herself into her work, expanding her hive count to 60, experimenting with different honey varieties, perfecting her craft. But there was an emptiness that even the bees could not fill. Relief came in early summer when Nora's courses were late. Then they were very late. Then she began waking with nausea so intense she could barely stand. The local doctor confirmed what she had desperately hoped. She was pregnant, about 2 months along, due in late January. When she told Nathan, he actually cried. She had never seen him cry before, not even at their wedding. He fell to his knees in front of her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he kept saying. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "I did not do it alone," Nora said, laughing through her own tears. "You may have had something to do with it. We are going to be parents." Nathan looked up at her, wonder written across his face. "Nora, we are going to have a baby." "We are," she confirmed, running her fingers through his hair. "We are going to be a family." Samuel was equally thrilled, immediately beginning to carve a cradle from a beautiful piece of cherry wood he had been saving for something special. Margaret threw a small celebration, inviting Nora's friends from town and presenting her with a stack of carefully sewn baby clothes. Even Mr. Thompson, normally gruff and business-focused, congratulated Nathan with uncharacteristic warmth. The pregnancy was not easy. Nora's nausea persisted well into her 5th month, and she found working with the hives increasingly difficult as her belly grew and her balance shifted. She was forced to let Nathan take over more of the physical work while she supervised and handled the business aspects. It chafed at her independence, but she knew it was necessary. "I feel useless," she complained one afternoon, watching Nathan move a hive while she sat in the shade. "You are growing a human being inside your body," Nathan said patiently. "That is hardly useless. You are doing the most important work of all, I know. I just miss being able to do everything myself." "You will again," Nathan promised. "This is temporary. And in a few months, you will be so busy with a baby that you will look back fondly on these days of sitting in the shade." He was right, though Nora would not admit it at the time. As autumn progressed, her body became less and less her own. Her back ached constantly. Her feet swelled. She could not remember the last time she had slept through the night without waking to use the outhouse. But every time she felt the baby move inside her, every kick and roll and hiccup, she was filled with such overwhelming love that the discomfort seemed trivial. Nathan was endlessly patient with her mood swings and physical complaints. He rubbed her aching feet every night without being asked. He helped her in and out of chairs when she struggled with her changing center of gravity. He talked to her belly just as she talked to her bees, telling their unborn child about the world waiting outside, about the bees and horses and flowers, about the family who loved them so much already. "You think they can hear you?" Nora asked one night, watching Nathan rest his head against her swollen stomach. "I do not know," Nathan admitted. "But if they can, I want them to know my voice. I want them to know they are wanted and loved and waited for with such anticipation that it sometimes takes my breath away." Nora felt tears prick her eyes again. Her emotions were so close to the surface these days that she cried at everything. "You are going to be such a good father." "I certainly hope so. I never had a good model for it, but I know what I wished I had experienced as a child. I know I want our baby to feel safe and valued and free to be whoever they are meant to be." "They will be lucky to have you," Nora said softly. January arrived with unusual cold, bringing ice storms that glazed everything in crystalline beauty and made travel treacherous. Nora grew increasingly uncomfortable, her belly so large she could barely move. The baby seemed to be running out of room, stretching and pushing in ways that sometimes made her gasp. "Any day now," the doctor said during a visit in mid-January. "The baby has dropped. Everything looks good. Just be ready." Labor started at 2 in the morning on January 18th. Nora woke to cramping pain that quickly intensified, and she knew immediately what was happening. She shook Nathan awake, trying to keep her voice calm even as panic fluttered in her chest. "It is time." Nathan was up instantly, pulling on clothes and boots. "I will get the doctor." "Father," he called for Samuel, who appeared quickly from his room. Stay with Nora, I will be back as fast as I can. Samuel helped Nora walk around the bedroom, supporting her through the increasingly painful contractions. You are doing fine, he assured her. My wife, Nathan's mother, had him during a terrible storm. The midwife could not get to us, so I delivered him myself. If necessary, I can do the same for this baby. Let us hope the doctor arrives, Nora said through gritted teeth. Nathan returned with the doctor within the hour, though it felt like an eternity. What followed was the longest, hardest experience of Nora's life. Labor progressed slowly, the pain building to levels she had not imagined possible. She screamed, she cried, she cursed, she begged for it to be over. Nathan never left her side, letting her crush his hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement even when she was too far gone to hear him. I can see the head, the doctor announced after what felt like years but was probably only 12 hours. One more big push, Mrs. Pierce. You can do this. Nora pushed with every ounce of strength she had left, and suddenly there was a release of pressure, a moment of shocking relief, and then the sound she had been waiting for, a baby's cry. It is a boy, the doctor said, holding up a squirming, red-faced infant. A healthy baby boy. Nathan was crying again, his face pressed against Nora's sweaty hair. You did it. You did it, my love. He is perfect. The doctor placed the baby on Nora's chest, and she looked down at her son through tears. He was indeed perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. His eyes were barely open, unfocused, but she felt him looking at her, recognizing her voice as she spoke. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Hello, my sweet boy. I am your mother, and I have been waiting so long to meet you." They named him Nathaniel Samuel Pierce, after both his father and grandfather. Little Nate, as they called him, was a good baby, relatively calm and easy to soothe. He nursed well, slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content as long as he could hear his mother's voice. Nora was surprised by the intensity of her love for this tiny person. She had thought she understood love, had felt it deeply for Nathan, but this was different. This was primal, fierce, overwhelming. She would have burned down the world for this baby, would have faced any danger to keep him safe. The first few weeks were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Nora learned to function on broken sleep, to nurse lying down so she could rest while the baby ate, to interpret different cries and what they meant. Nathan helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with Nate when he was fussy, singing off key lullabies that somehow worked to calm the baby. Samuel was besotted with his grandson. He held Nate for hours, telling him stories about his father as a baby, about the grandmother he would never meet, about the family history he was now part of. Watching the old man with the infant, seeing 3 generations together, filled Nora with profound gratitude. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the land and new challenges for Nora. She struggled to balance her bees with baby care, often strapping Nate to her chest in a sling while she worked. The bees seemed fascinated by the baby, hovering near but never stinging, as if they recognized him as an extension of Nora herself. "You are going to grow up with bees," Nora told Nate as she checked the hives with him sleeping against her chest. "You will learn to respect them and love them and understand them. They will be part of your life just as they are part of mine." Nathan sometimes worried that she was pushing herself too hard, trying to do too much too soon. "You just had a baby. You are allowed to rest, to let me handle more." "I am not fragile," Nora insisted, though secretly she was more tired than she had ever been in her life. "I can manage. I know you can manage anything, but you do not have to manage alone." Nathan took Nate from her arms, settling the baby against his shoulder. "Let me help you." "That is what I am here for." Slowly, Nora learned to accept help, to recognize that asking for support was not weakness but wisdom. They developed a rhythm, a way of sharing responsibilities that worked for both of them. Nathan took morning duty with Nate, letting Nora sleep a bit longer. She handled afternoons while he worked with the horses. Evenings were family time, all of them together, often with Samuel, eating dinner and talking about the day. As Nate grew, his personality emerged. He was a serious baby, watching everything with intense concentration. He loved being outside, would stop crying instantly if taken to the beehives, and responded to his mother's voice above all others. At 6 months, he was already trying to imitate the humming sound Nora made to calm the bees, his baby babble taking on an interesting rhythm. "He is going to be a beekeeper like his mother," Samuel said one afternoon, watching Nate reach toward a bee that had landed on Nora's arm. "Or a rancher like his father," Nathan countered. "He gets excited every time he sees the horses." "He can be both," Nora said. "He can be anything he wants to be. We will make sure of that." Life settled into a new normal. The honey business continued to thrive, with Nora now selling to customers as far away as Fort Smith. Nathan's horse breeding operation was growing as well, his reputation for quality animals spreading through the region. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to save a little each month and plan for the future. Jeremiah Finch's honey operation collapsed that spring after several customers reported finding impurities in his product. He left town quietly, leaving behind debts and a ruined reputation. Nora felt vindicated but also a little sad. She had never wanted to destroy Finch, just to be left alone to do her work. "Justice has a way of working itself out," Samuel said when they heard the news. "You built your success on quality and integrity. He built his on cutting corners and intimidation. In the end, only one of those approaches is sustainable." When Nate was a year old, they threw a party to celebrate. Margaret brought her son Tommy, who was a few months older than Nate, and the two babies sat on a blanket together, examining each other with serious expressions. Mr. Thompson attended, bringing a beautiful carved rocking horse that clearly represented many hours of work. Even the local minister stopped by with a small gift. "You have built something special here," Reverend Thomas said to Nora and Nathan as the party wound down. "Not just a business or a home, but a real community. People respect what you have accomplished, both of you." "We have been lucky," Nathan said. "Luck has little to do with it," the Reverend replied. "Hard work, integrity, and love, that is what built this." That night, after Nate was asleep and the house was quiet, Nora and Nathan sat on their porch and looked out over their land. The bees were settled in their hives, the horses quiet in the barn, the whole world peaceful under a sky full of stars. "You ever think about that first day?" Nora asked. "When you heard me talking to my bees?" "All the time," Nathan admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, how easily we might never have met. And then I think about how grateful I am that my horse needed water that day, that I heard your voice, that I had the courage to approach you." "I think about how I almost sent you away," Nora said. "How I almost let my fear and independence keep me from the best thing that ever happened to me." "Well, one of the best things," she smiled, thinking of Nate asleep in his cradle. "Tied for first place, maybe." Nathan laughed and pulled her closer. "I will accept a tie, as long as I get to keep you both for the rest of my life." "That can be arranged," Nora said, lifting her face for a kiss. The next few years brought both joy and challenges. Samuel's health began to fail when Nate was 3, his joints growing increasingly painful, his breathing labored. He moved into the main house so they could care for him more easily, and Nate became his constant companion, sitting with his grandfather and listening to endless stories. "I am grateful I lived to see this," Samuel told Nora one afternoon as they watched Nate play in the yard. "To see my son happy and settled, to meet my grandson, to know that the Pierce name will continue with pride. I can rest easy now." "Do not talk like that," Nora said, though she knew the time was coming. "You have years left, perhaps. But if I do not, know that you have made my last years happy ones. You gave my son a home and a purpose, and you gave me a family to belong to. I could not ask for more." Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep that winter, just before Christmas. They buried him in a small cemetery on the edge of Bentonville, under a tree that would bloom pink every spring. Nate, now old enough to understand death, cried for his grandfather and asked repeatedly when he would come back. "His body is gone," Nora explained gently, holding her son close. "But his love is still with us, in our memories and our hearts. And someday, when you are very old, you will tell your children about their great-grandfather Samuel, and he will live on that way too." Nathan grieved quietly, spending long hours alone in the barn or riding across their land. Nora gave him space but made sure he knew she was there, ready to listen or hold him whenever he was ready. Eventually, the sharp pain of loss dulled to an ache they could live with, and life moved forward as it always does. When Nate was 5, Nora became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, both the discomforts and the joys. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and labor, while still painful, went much faster. She delivered a healthy baby girl in early autumn, a tiny thing with wispy blonde hair and her father's hazel eyes. They named her Marion, after Nora's mother, but called her Annie. Nate was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from changing diapers to choosing which dress she should wear. Nathan joked that they had created a third parent, so devoted was Nate to Annie's care. "She is my sister," Nate explained seriously when asked why he was so attentive. "I have to take care of her. That is what big brothers do." Watching her children together, seeing Nate's gentleness with Annie, and the way the baby's whole face lit up when her brother entered the room, Nora felt a completeness she had never known was possible. Her life was full, almost overwhelmingly so, but it was a good fullness, one built on love and purpose. The business continued to grow. By the time Annie was 2, Nora had over 80 hives and employed 2 assistants to help with the work. Nathan's horses were sought after throughout Arkansas and beyond, with buyers coming from as far as Oklahoma Territory to purchase his stock. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, anticipating a growing family. That anticipation proved accurate when Nora became pregnant a 3rd time, delivering another boy when Annie was 3. They named him Samuel, after his grandfather, and called him Sam. He was a cheerful, easy baby who seemed content to go with the flow, smiling at everyone and crying only when absolutely necessary. 3 children, Nathan marveled one evening as they watched their offspring play together in the yard. "We have 3 children. Sometimes I can barely believe it." "Believe it," Nora said dryly, "especially when you are the one getting up with Sam in the middle of the night." "I do not mind," Nathan said honestly. "Every time I wake up and see our family, I remember when it was just me and my father, moving from place to place with nothing to our names. And I think about how far we have come, how much we have built. It feels like a miracle." "It feels like hard work," Nora countered, but she was smiling. "A beautiful, exhausting, wonderful miracle of hard work." As the children grew, they each developed distinct personalities. Nate was serious and studious, already learning to read at 5 and showing a keen interest in how things worked. He loved the bees as much as Nora did, often accompanying her to the hives and asking endless questions about bee behavior and honey production. Annie was energetic and bold, climbing trees and riding horses almost before she could walk. She had no fear, which terrified Nora and amused Nathan in equal measure. She looked like her mother but had her father's adventurous spirit. Sam was the peacemaker, the one who could calm any dispute between his siblings with a smile and a silly joke. He loved being the baby of the family, soaking up attention from everyone. "We should probably stop at 3, Nora said one night when Sam was about a year old. She was exhausted from a day of managing both children and bees, and the idea of another pregnancy was daunting. "Whatever you want," Nathan said. "I am happy with our family exactly as it is, though if you change your mind, you know I am willing." Nora laughed. "Of course you are. You do not have to carry them for 9 months and then push them into the world." "True. My contribution is considerably easier and more enjoyable." She swatted his arm playfully, but later, as she watched him with the children, she found herself thinking that maybe 4 children would not be so bad. Maybe 5. They had the space, the resources, and most importantly, the love, but life had other plans. When Sam was 2, a drought hit Arkansas, devastating crops and wildflowers. Nora's bees struggled, with several colonies dying despite her best efforts. Honey production dropped by more than half, and for the first time since the early years, money became tight. Nathan's horse business was affected too, as people had less money for purchasing quality animals. They dipped into their savings to keep afloat, cutting back on everything non-essential. The children were too young to fully understand, but they knew something was wrong from the worried conversations their parents had late at night. "We will make it through this," Nathan kept saying, though Nora could hear the doubt beneath his optimism. "We have weathered storms before." "Not like this," Nora said, looking at her account books with growing despair. "If the drought continues into next year, we might lose everything." The crisis lasted 18 months. They got creative, with Nora reaching out to new markets and Nathan taking on additional work breaking horses for other ranches. They planted drought-resistant flowers near the hives and hand-watered them from the well, an exhausting process that took hours each day. The children helped too, carrying water in small buckets, learning early about what it meant to fight for what you loved. Just when things seemed darkest, the rains came. At first just a drizzle, then steady soaking rains that lasted for days. The land greened almost overnight, wildflowers exploding across the fields in a riot of color. The bees, which had been barely surviving, suddenly thrived again, bringing in nectar by the pound. "We made it," Nora said, standing in her bee yard and watching the hives hum with renewed activity. "We actually made it." Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Of course we did. We are a team, remember. Together, we can survive anything." That year's honey harvest was the best Nora had ever produced. The bees, perhaps sensing the end of scarcity, worked with unprecedented energy. She sold out her entire stock by October and had orders for the next season before winter even arrived. Nathan's horse business rebounded as well, with several major purchases that replenished their depleted savings, and then some. By the time Sam was 4, they were more than comfortable again. They had weathered the storm, learned valuable lessons about resilience and adaptation, and emerged stronger. Nora updated her business practices to be more drought-resistant, diversifying her honey varieties and establishing relationships with markets in multiple states. Nathan did the same, ensuring they would never again be so vulnerable to a single crisis. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The children grew, each year bringing new milestones and challenges. Nate started school and excelled, especially in science and mathematics. Annie learned to ride like a seasoned ranch hand, often helping her father with the horses. Sam became known throughout town for his charm and ability to befriend anyone. Nora's reputation as a beekeeper spread beyond Arkansas. She began receiving letters from other beekeepers asking for advice, and eventually started writing articles for agricultural journals about her methods. Nathan teased her about becoming famous, but she could tell he was proud. "My wife, the celebrated bee expert," he would say with a grin. "I always knew you were extraordinary." When Nate was 15, he approached his parents with a request. "I want to expand the honey operation. I have been studying bee breeding, and I think I can develop strains that are more productive and disease-resistant. If you will trust me with 20 hives, I will run them as my own project and prove I can do it." Nora and Nathan exchanged glances. 15 seemed young for such responsibility, but Nate had been working with the bees since he was old enough to walk. He knew the business inside and out. "All right," Nora said. 20 hives. You will maintain them completely, handle all aspects of care and honey production. But you will also continue your regular schoolwork and chores. And at the end of the season, we will evaluate how it went and decide whether to continue." Nate's face lit up with a smile that reminded Nora of Nathan when he was excited about something. "Thank you. You will not regret this." He was right. Nate's project was a stunning success, producing honey of exceptional quality and demonstrating clear improvements in the colony health. By the next spring, he was managing 50 hives, and by the time he was 18, he was a full partner in the business. Annie showed no interest in bees but became indispensable to the horse operation. She had her father's gift for understanding the animals, could calm even the most fractious horse with patience and gentle firmness. By 16, she was training horses that sold for premium prices, and buyers specifically asked for animals she had worked with. Sam, the youngest, was still finding his path. He was interested in everything and focused on nothing, flitting from one passion to another. He loved music, considered becoming a teacher, thought maybe he would be a merchant. Nora and Nathan let him explore, confident he would find his calling eventually. The years continued to pass, bringing the bittersweet progression of children growing into adults. Nate was the first to marry, at 22, to a sweet girl named Elizabeth who shared his love of bees. They had a small wedding in the same church where Nora and Nathan had married, and moved into a house on the eastern edge of the property, close enough to work together but far enough for privacy. Annie married at 21 to a cowboy named James who worked on a ranch 2 counties over. They settled nearby, and Annie continued to help with the horses while also starting her own family. Her first child, a daughter, arrived when she was 23, and Nora became a grandmother for the first time. Holding that baby, looking into a face that was a combination of Annie and James but also somehow Nora herself, was a deeply moving experience. She saw her mother in the baby's eyes, her father in the shape of her hands. She saw the continuation of everything they had built, the legacy extending into another generation. Sam eventually decided to become a veterinarian, attending school in Little Rock, and then returning to Bentonville to open a practice. He never married, preferring his independence, but he was a devoted uncle to his growing number of nieces and nephews. As Nora and Nathan entered their 50s, they began to step back from the day-to-day work, letting their children take over more of the operations. It was not easy for Nora to relinquish control of her bees, but she had to admit that Nate had taken the business to heights she had never imagined. They now had over 200 hives spread across 3 properties, employed 8 people, and shipped honey across the country. Nathan's transition was easier. He had always planned to hand the horse breeding to Annie, and he took deep satisfaction in watching her excel. He spent his days doing lighter work, mending tack and maintaining equipment, always available for advice, but no longer carrying the heavy burden of primary responsibility. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over land they had worked for nearly 40 years, Nathan took Nora's hand. "You remember what I said that first day?" he asked. "When I heard you talking to your bees." "You said a lot of things that first day," Nora replied, smiling at the memory. "Most of them while fumbling with your hat." Nathan laughed. "I did fumble quite a bit, did I not? But I told you that your voice, the way you spoke to those bees, was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. And I asked if I could hear it again." "You asked if you could hear it always," Nora corrected softly. "That is right. And you let me. For 40 years now, I have gotten to hear your voice every day, talking to the bees, to our children, to me, and it is still the most beautiful sound in the world." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, Nathan could still make her cry with his words. "You old romantic." "Always," he agreed. "Until my last breath, I will be in love with you, Nora Pierce. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you to me," she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Everything good in my life came from that day you heard me with my bees. Our family, our life, all of it stems from that moment." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. From the bee yard came the gentle hum of the colonies settling for the night, a sound that had been the soundtrack to Nora's entire adult life. From the barn came the soft whinny of horses, and from the house next door, the laughter of grandchildren playing before bedtime. "We built something good," Nathan said eventually. "We did," Nora agreed. "Something very good indeed." As they stood to go inside, Nora paused by the door and looked back at her bee yard, at the rows of white hives glowing in the twilight. She could see her younger self standing there, alone and determined, speaking tenderly to her colonies. And she could see Nathan as he had been, a young cowboy who stopped to water his horse and heard something that changed his life. "Thank you," she whispered to those long-ago versions of themselves. "Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance." Inside, the house was warm and full of the sounds of family. Nate and Elizabeth had come for dinner, bringing their 2 children. Annie had stopped by with her 3 kids. Sam was there too, playing his guitar for the grandchildren. The table was still covered with the remains of the meal, dishes waiting to be washed, evidence of life fully lived. Nora moved through the chaos with ease born of long practice, helping clean up while chatting with her daughters-in-law and sneaking cookies to grandchildren who were supposed to be getting ready for bed. Nathan sat in his favorite chair, a grandchild on each knee, telling them the same stories his father had told him so many years ago. As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Nora stood at the door and hugged each child, each grandchild, holding them just a moment longer than necessary. These people, this family, they were her greatest accomplishment. More than any business success or recognition, this was what mattered. Love, multiplied and extended, growing like her bees did, creating new colonies that would establish themselves and thrive. When the last guest had left and the house was finally quiet, Nathan found Nora in the bee yard. She stood in her favorite spot, near the hive called Prosperity, speaking softly to her bees as she had done for nearly 50 years. "You worked hard today, my darlings," she murmured. "The clover was good, was it not? And tomorrow will be good too. The weather will be fine, and you will dance in the sun and gather the sweetness of the world. Sleep well tonight. I will see you in the morning." Nathan waited until she finished before approaching. "They are lucky bees to have you." "I am the lucky one," Nora said. "They gave me everything. A livelihood, a purpose, and the love of my life who heard me speaking to them and asked to hear it always." Nathan wrapped his arms around her, and they stood together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the gentle hum of bees and the warmth of a life well lived. The cowboy and the beekeeper, still in love after all these years, still building and growing and tending to the life they had created together. Above them, stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their wedding, the births of their children, every triumph and trial. And in the distance, a new hive hummed with activity, bees working even into the night, building their future one cell at a time, just as Nora and Nathan had built theirs. Everything they had dreamed of that first evening by the creek had come true, and more. They had the land, the home, the family, the partnership built on mutual respect and deep love. They had weathered droughts and doubts, celebrated victories and mourned losses, and through it all they had remained united. "Ready for bed?" Nathan asked eventually. "In a moment," Nora said. "I want to stay here just a little longer, with you and the bees and this perfect night." So they stayed, holding each other in the darkness, listening to the sound of their bees and their breathing and their hearts beating in synchrony. And when they finally went inside, it was hand in hand, as they had done everything for 40 years, as they would continue to do for whatever time remained. The beekeeper had whispered to her colonies, and the cowboy had heard her tenderness and asked to hear it always. She had said yes, and from that simple answer had come a lifetime of love, a family that would carry on for generations, and a happiness neither of them had imagined possible. It was, Nora thought as she drifted off to sleep in Nathan's arms, the most beautiful story she had ever been part of. And unlike her bees who lived for only a season, their love would endure, passed down through children and grandchildren, a legacy as sweet and golden as the honey that had brought them together.